Like a nice rich theme of green trees, and at the base of those you'll often see the kangaroos coming out just on dusk. What's they're saying? No, well, I suppose it's a loose interpretation, but it's just a bit like the terracotta soldiers in China. Now you know that Aboriginals use this, they grind up some of this termite mound and mix it with water to drink it, to settle up. Well, they're exactly the same as kangaroos. Yeah. All right, so come in, take the jacket with you.
Come on.
It looks like a little termite mound. Baby, she's a stride at the moment. Gorgeous animal. And she's, well, I won't give away all the stories, but I'll leave you with Jenny to talk to you about. So welcome everybody. Have you had a wonderful day today? Yes. It's beautiful weather. Look, we're nearly in spring up here, but you've got to remember it's still the end of winter. Isn't it lovely? Aren't we lucky? This is winter. And you know, it's cool and chilly and there's a fog in the morning, but we do get beautiful days like this. So I'm just going to take a few minutes and take a little bit about the weather and a few things about the cattle station, and then we can talk about the cows and the horses and all of that. But you know, this is the beginning of the dry season. So we've got two main seasons in the tropics, the wet and the dry, and it's been a fantastic wet season. We've had over 70 inches of rainfall here, which is astounding. Look at it, it's still green. You know, it's sometimes in August and September it can look like this. So we've got these extreme changes in the climate. The wet season comes in, of course, with hot summer months. We get heavy sort of thunderstorms in the afternoon, very humid. We get up to like nearly 40 degrees here. Bolts are lighting and down, we can get inches of rain in a short while. That's the beginning of the wet. Then we start to get monsoon, rough weather, and this year we've had two cyclones, one above us and one just below us. So that's where that good season came from. However, a bad season is like El Nino when it doesn't rain. So we've got to be able to consider that, you know, in our lifestyle here, the sort of cattle we have, the way we use the land, we've got those sort of possibilities. A great wet season or a lousy one. So the wet and the dry, well, coming into the dry season now, it could be Christmas before it rains again. So it can get pretty dry in a few weeks from now. Then we got things like fire seasons. This year a lot of bushgrass grew, so now we have a high fire risk. All of that sort of thing goes on. You know, I love the bush. It's got a few problems, but I do love it. It takes a bit of putting up with and a bit of doing, but it's a great lifestyle. Air smells clean, doesn't it? Yes. You're 1,200 feet above sea level here. So we're not real high, we're not as high as the Atherton Tablelands, but we're well up from the coast. And it's got a pretty beautiful environment. You can see the rainforest mountains here. But from here on out, it begins to be open savanna country, open bushland. And that's where the big cattle stations start. We're pretty lucky. We're sort of on the edge of it here. I'll talk up for you a bit. Well, we're on the edge of it here, and we've got quite a bit of extra rainfall that comes in off the mountains here. Cattle stations are. So the majority of Weatherby stations isn't these lovely little green flats along here. It looks more like that bush country out there. Unimproved native pasture. So here we've got kangaroo grass, spear grass. But the cattle we choose have to suit the environment. So if you're a Angus farmer or a Hereford farmer and you came to live here, you'd have to rethink the strategy. The sort of cattle we breed here, high Brahman content cattle. I'll bring some in to show you. Basically, it's all about doing what's best in that area. If I suddenly moved to the temperate climate and had to suddenly run different breeds of cattle, I'd have to learn it all over again. But you know, it's a lovely, lovely spot to live. I'm a little bit old-fashioned because I still use horses for my work. Even though we're in 2006 and you can use motorbikes, helicopters, you will be familiar with American quarter horse, which is a breed, of course, that came in from the US into this country many years ago. But while you were breeding quarter horses for quarter of a mile racing,
we were breeding Australian stock horses for long distance work. So the quarter horse is very famous for the short takeoff it has, very powerful over a short distance. These horses are very long lasting. They have a great name in our country for working, and so they're probably pretty versatile, the type of horse they are. Australia was like the US, I guess, in that we didn't have any native horses. Horses came with settlement because we're a British colony. They picked up horses on their way through the various countries, but they put good British thoroughbreds into the stock over the years. So Little Riches is a lovely type of Australian stock horse mare. Now, it's the biggest breed in Australia outside of racing horses. It's actually a corporate company, the Australian Stock Horse Society, that runs out of Scone in New South Wales, which is the big horse breeding area in Australia. And the company, one of those things that makes money every year and profit. It's run by a board of directors. It's all about horse breeders. But I'm one of those directors, so there are times when I don't look like this. I've got the suit on, I've got the bag, and I'm getting on the aeroplane. I'm getting off the aeroplane back like this again. So I lead a very interesting life. But you know, my main interest would be horses. So when I was a little girl and dreamt about having horses, if I could have looked in the crystal ball, I would have been pretty happy. I grew up in the city. They come from a horse family or a cattle family, and look what I ended up doing. Fate, isn't it? I loved horses, always loved them, and my godfather taught me to ride, so I rode polar horses at a pretty young age. And I guess that's the reason why I love to use them with cattle. There's a sport that we do in this country called camp drafting that's very tied in with people like me who work cattle. We use our horses on the week, through the week, and on the weekend we go chase cows for fun. So she's of average height, she's about 15 hands, we measure them from here to here. She's a chestnut horse, although some of you might know that as sorrel. Now most horses have identifying features. They might have a couple of white socks or stockings off their leg. They could have a star or a blaze. And then they've got these other things called whorls, which are like thumbprints. She's got one here and here. But the main identifying feature on this mare is her brand. And you can see it's K10V. And it's white because it was frozen on there. Okay, so liquid nitrogen, and you've got to freeze these on for 40 seconds. Now people say that's very humane, but you know what, if I was a horse, I'd rather just get that takes a long while to do. But that's how we identify her. So if they're stolen or lost, we can say chestnut mare, that's a brand, no other marks, and hopefully we'll get it back. Sometimes it doesn't happen. But that is the first line of defence against theft, is having the brand on. When we talk about the brands on the cattle, you'll see that the cattle have a different brand. The horses usually have the brand from where they were born. These cattle, you can see today, were all born here, so they've got this property brand, 5YC. So, if you look at this mare too, you'll see she's saddled up. Australian stock saddle, no roping horn. If you're riders, you'll wonder where it went. We never had them on these saddles. But they're designed for a much more English way of riding. Now, I don't look real English way of riding because this is more Australian type. But I did have some lovely ladies come over from England to visit me. We're over at my property and they turned up for a horse ride in the They look wonderful, but they were really upset when we started galloping through the trees and all the spider webs caught on them. And they didn't like the mess, so look out for the snakes in the holes, and they said it was a real experience. We have these spiders here in this country called golden orb spiders. And when I talk about spiders' webs, they make like a silk thread. And when you come out of the bush, your horse is covered in golden threads. And if they get stuck in your mouth, they just about pull you up. So when I met spiders' webs, I met those spiders. So Australian riding is a little bit more like English. And that you ride right. I've ridden most of my life. I like nice things to ride, no doubt about it. They need to be fairly athletic. They need to be able to do what I want. They need to be able to step back. about it to someone yesterday. We were miles from home. I was on this horse. And you know what the best thing is? Like a really big horse. You're coming home. You're not jogging and dancing around. She's marching. Marching home. So a working horse needs to have all of that. They need to be able to gallop out, get the cows. When you stop, you want to be able to relax. They're not like race horses. They're a bit different. So just going back in history a little bit, when these horses were developed in this country over years of breeding, they needed a horse that was pretty hardy in the new land, the new country. The bush rangers needed fast horses, so did the squatters, so did the troopers, the police of the time. The explorers needed tough horses, and later on a lot of Australian stock horses were exported overseas for war horses, for the mounted cavalry. It's Australian Light Horse Infantry. Australian Light Horse Brigade anyway, but some of them went to Northern Africa for the First World War, some went to India and some went to the Boer War. Like thousands and thousands of them that never came back to Australia, but they have this fabulous name and they have wonderful monuments to them throughout Australia. We love our horses, but there's one day in Australia that stops the place, and it's coming up soon. And all Australians are just great horse lovers on that day. Do you know what it is? It's called the Melbourne Cup. It's the big race day, and it's coming up in November. Everywhere you'll be in Australia just stops dead to watch a horse race on the telly. In the smallest pub, in the biggest hotels, boats at sea, everybody stops. So we're this great nation of horse lovers, particularly one day a year. All right, can I grab some cows?
Anybody want to try to ride one?
No. Where that sideways business comes in. Now, I said cows, but I really meant bullocks and steers. So cattle stations are like big breeding properties. Some cattle stations are huge, and all they do is breed yearling cattle. Baby calves, at the time they're a year old, they sell them off. So so you can see the condition of them. Well, they just eat grass. Now, in some places, you'd be fattening them on corn, you'd be fattening them on rations. They could be in feedlots, though this is not a big thing in this part of Australia. Certainly in the more temperate areas it is. But in this part, grass, fat and beef. So we're in a very interesting position up here because we're close to Asia. And one of the things that happened when mad cow disease hit some countries in the world is that suddenly those countries that were buying their beef looked elsewhere. They were looking for clean, organic, not grown in feedlot type cattle, and guess what we had? Thousands and hundreds of thousands of them. So being in a good position to export to Asia, a lot of the breeding today is structured around trying to meet those markets. Before I go and pull a few of these cattle out though, I probably should tell you a bit of ancient history about Weatherby, because Weatherby's got a very special part in the cattle industry in North Queensland. What happened here in 1868 is that William Grove and his wife came here, they took up squatter's ground here, and they built Weatherby Homestead. Now that's where we'll be having dinner, and the homestead is 1868. That's ancient history in Australia. Up there it's beautiful, but it's the typical old rectangular homestead with the wraparound veranda. Now, what they found there is there was Port Douglas, there was no Cairns. There was Cooktown. Now Cooktown was the gold town where everybody went, they jumped their animals off at sea. got into Cooktown and then went to Maytown to the goldfields. They went to the Palmer River Gold Rush. And sometime later gold was discovered further southwest. But to get people to there, it was very difficult to come across country. So the government at the time built a road from Port Douglas back here to the goldfields.